All right. Welcome to this week's edition of our bi-weekly webinar, which is mostly bi-weekly. Sometimes it's tri-weekly, and sometimes it's try as we may because we have another date recorded for something else. But with that, it's fall, folks. It's time for college fun. It's time for taking your kids back to University of Iowa. Oh, wait. I took my daughter, my oldest daughter, to University of Iowa since I've last been on the program. So for many of you well-wishers, thank you. She's there. It's awesome. It's a great time. There were no tears, which is odd for me. Normally, that would be something that was kind of heart-wrenching, but it felt like we were taking her home. We were taking her to some place that we'd been before. So it was interesting to share an experience we've had 30 years later with her. So that was a wonderful, wonderful time that I've had here just on a I guess 2.5 week ago basis. So she's been having a blast going to school. Of course, has the college lineup, which is starting classes at 11:30, which is very smart, I suppose, is not to miss those as well. We all look at that, go, oh, that's really smart. But I took all mine in the morning so I could play sports in the afternoon. It was different. But coming back, what's been going on in the markets? The market's been fairly volatile. If you look at the economy, I don't know if you've heard there's an election coming as well. There's a lot going on with news. I would expect there to be some trepidation and volatility. I actually have my caution socks on because when you have a stock that moves up as much as some have lately, you need to exercise caution. There's going to be some retracement and some retraction. If you look at great stocks over time, you're going to have 50% drops in them, which are just common because things happen. Antitrust comes in. You're going to find everybody's against them. But as long as their business is a core, fundamentally strong business, they'll continue to do well. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, by the way. It is a co-pilot with us. It is driving this section of growth in the economy. But like normal, what you've normally seen in these is you see this period of time when there's early adopters and everybody's super excited about something. And then you see a period of time of like, okay, but what's that going to do? Normally it's a couple, 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4, 5, 6. In the past, it was 10 or 15. But that cycle is happening faster. And the reason being is because this is a rapidly adopted, I guess it's called thing, artificial intelligence is. So watching that, it's been pretty interesting. So we'll talk more about that as we go. But as I begin, my gratitude is dropping off my daughter, pulling weeds, fall, college football games, all the things you find in fall. Door County, which is another thing that my wife and I did. My 24th anniversary yesterday with my lovely wife, Deb, as well. We just had a wonderful, wonderful time. So just some of the things I've recently been quite grateful for. Let me go to, how about Zach?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to celebrate one of my brothers by life this weekend. He's getting married in Appleton, and just extremely blessed with the people that God has put in my life over time, and he's one of them. So extremely excited to share with him.
Awesome. Thank you. How about yourself, Ken?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Good to be here on the Zoom with all of you. And I am grateful for teachers. Kids are back in school, second day. It's really impressive to watch these teachers and how it's become a year-round profession, if you will. Because even though they have a couple months off in the summer, they really don't take too much off, actually, because they're reaching out to students, they're getting together for ice cream meetups and stuff like that, really creating that connection with the students. I find that to be very impressive. And I find that to be a very above and beyond probably what they would probably need to do. So my shout out goes to the teachers. Grateful for all of you. It's a hard job. And we thank you for everything that you do to shape our youth. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate that. How about Mike? Mr. Man.
Thanks, Chris. I'm actually grateful for Ryan on the team. Him and I have become pretty good friends, and today he's taking an exam. He's been studying very hard for something that is in the direction of analytical, sort of research orientated, and today's that day for him. So think about him. I'm sure he's going to do well. Looking forward to hearing the results. So good luck to Ryan, and just grateful for him and his friendship.
Good. I'm glad you announced that to everybody on the webinar as well, because then there's no pressure.
Hey, he didn't hear it, right?
I know exactly. That's good. How about Michael?
Gosh, I laughed because I actually had the same gratitude as Mike this morning for Ryan. I know he's worked extremely hard, but also grateful that football is back. Get to sleep one more night before week one of the NFL season kicks off, and we move into the Packers season officially beginning on Friday. So something the whole state can unite around.
Awesome. Appreciate that as well. How about let's go, Ashley?
Thank you, Chris. I'm grateful for the last 4 days home with family, just enjoying some last summer activities, including like the lake, and of course, getting into that fall schedule for sports and fun still to come. So thank you.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. How about Lisa?
Thank you, Chris. Yes, kind of reiterate what Ashley said. Grateful for the last long weekend. It was actually my first day of actually going on a bike outside since I had the knee surgery in April. I've been on a bike indoors doing rehabilitation, but not on an actual outdoor run. So it was a great feeling to be back in the saddle, as they say. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you. And there's a lot to be grateful for. I didn't hear a lot of you talk about the Americans and the US Open as well. I mean, there's so many things if you look at it. I tend to find gratitude is interesting. It's something that if you forget to practice it, it does sort of go away as you take things for granted again. So taking gratitude for granted is something we don't want to do. It's a whole different module, but I wanted to just share that idea with you. Really look for gratitude. If you get one thing out of this today, look for things to be grateful for. There are so many, and you are so blessed. You just don't realize it. So oftentimes I wanted to bring that to you because it takes that from us as well. So one thing I wanted to talk about here in volatility wise, when you find markets are hitting new highs, now 70% of the time over history, markets hit new highs. So it's nothing new. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but at times it freaks people out. And I want to say, well, what does that mean? Freaks people out. It gets people very uncomfortable going, oh my gosh, I should do something about this, as they see events going on that are reported in the news that if you didn't even know they were going on, you wouldn't even care. But the news tends to heighten things. Its goal is to actually get you all stirred up and to watch the next program, right? But in this case here, we have something called an amygdala, the middle of our brain, and the amygdala causes like a fight or flight. We feel better when we take some action. So when you hear this on the news, it kind of stirs you up and then you want to take some action. The good news is you don't have direct control of being able to buy and sell. Unfortunately, many people do have direct control of being able to buy and sell, and they take that kind of a feeling and they operate their portfolios that way. It's a very interesting thing to watch, but watching the cyclical aspect of, the irrational aspect of human emotion is absolutely crazy. I've done it for over almost 30 years now. I think this will be my 30th year this year. And it's interesting. A 30-year career has passed by very quickly. I have not lamented any single day of it. It's really interesting, and I'll talk more about that another time. Back to what's been going on. We've seen things like inflation tame. You see gas prices somewhat high, $3 and something, and that becomes normal. But what's really kind of escalated for me is you've looked at the overall price of living and the overall wages. We've got some great chart by Goldman Sachs recently just showed the cost of housing and the cost of education is off the charts, and wages have not kept up with it. So you're finding it actually more and more difficult for people to live on a normal basis. We got to figure out some ways for that to catch up, so for productivity, for earnings to move up higher and prices to stay relatively stable. Now, if we can figure that out, then we'd probably be some sort of an economic guru in some form, but that's a hope that we have as well. Again, there's so much going on across the different aspects of markets. Why don't I hop over to Mike's minute? Mike, what should we be paying attention to? What do you have that's going on?
Thanks, Chris. And so I really appreciate a lot of things that you just said, because it leads right into some of the things that I've been thinking about literally almost constantly, which, yeah, that's neither here nor there. But anyways, so looking at markets today and kind of how things are moving, it's fascinating to see some of the big stories. We got a GDP print but an expectation that GDP is now preliminary results showing it growing a little bit faster than expecting. But one of the biggest news stories recently was about one company. And it's fascinating. We talk about diversification. Chris talks about having a solution to some of this stuff. Well, diversification is a great tool to kind of lead us in that direction, because it might not seem in certain times that certain things keep up, because if you're not owning that one company that's really running this whole time and creating this large sort of ballooned position within an index, that if that keeps going, it'll keep pulling it upwards. And on the contrary, when that starts to fall down, you see it pulling everything else down with it from that standpoint. So it's very important that we want exposure to these different places, but not so much that we're putting all our eggs in one basket, because in the moment that we start to need income from a portfolio specifically, we got to make sure that money is able to be there. So being more concentrated is taking more risk. More risk is okay early on. As we get further into our investment lives, it's important to make sure that that diversification is that much more prevalent in our portfolios. And if we start early with these same tactics, but in different ways, and move to something more conservative later on, these 2% swings in the market, like we just felt, a lot of it being dragged down by one individual company, one that we do have exposure to, albeit, but not the same amount that the index does all in itself. it's a really good thing because we have different places. We're seeing different asset classes start to outperform on the short term. And short term is important for those taking income. So we want to make sure that's locked away and we have options to be able to take that stuff. So thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that. I appreciate that as well. How about let's go to Zach's facts.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'll run through kind of where markets are at for the year, just in general, and off of the last 2 weeks as well, since our last webinar, and then kind of touch on a few volatility facts too. So markets are about 2 to 3% off where they were 2 weeks ago, and that was really thanks to just yesterday. So the Dow Jones, about 8.5% positive on the year. The NASDAQ, which is about 50% weighted towards technology, is 16% positive on the year. The S&P 500, or let me rephrase that, the S&P 500 is 16%, the NASDAQ is 14, which was extremely interesting because there's a lot of volatility in the technology sector. The company that Mike mentioned was a big part of that, but also semiconductors in general was a big part of that over the last 2 weeks. The Russell 2000, about 6% up on the year, and actually it's the only one that's positive in the last 2 weeks. So Mike talked last time about the expectations for interest rates, watching those closely when it comes to the impact on those smaller size companies. If rates do indeed drop, those smaller size companies that haven't done as well for the last 1, 2, 3 years could do really well here ending the year, and adds the diversification that Chris and Mike talked about. International, about 6.5% positive. Emerging markets, right around 5%. And when it comes to volatility, I shared this on the last webinar, but I think it's worth repeating, is kind of those biases that Chris talked about. One of those is the recency bias. When we don't have volatility for a while, when it's here, it feels like it's really bad, when it's really just normal and necessary for the long term. And according to MFS, by the numbers, after experiencing just 4 one-day moves of more than 2% in the first half of 2024, the NASDAQ 100 has already had 10 2+ moves in the second half, and that was through August 15th. We probably add 1 or 2 more since then. So 5% corrections are extremely common, 10% corrections are common, and we've actually had 20% corrections in the last 3 years. When those overweight of those large companies that Mike talked about, when one of those goes down 10%, you're really going to feel that. Almost 30% of the S&P 500 is just in 7 companies now. So we're kind of looking for different metrics and measures to better gauge how the market's actually doing, because some of those traditional ones actually aren't necessarily the best anymore. But with that, Chris, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much. It's kind of interesting when you hear stories like NVIDIA's share. Well, I can't mention. There's a company out there that is a chip maker that has lost $300 billion in market cap. Well, it's $3 trillion in market cap. You can figure out which one it is. That's up to you. But you hear these dramatic stories. That's a 10% correction. Oh my gosh, 10%. That's nothing, right? So you look at these things, putting them in perspective is important. If I want to give you numbers and large numbers, it can freak you out. But if I want to give you perspective and offer you kind of a better way to look at it, it's the words are very important. I'll leave it at that, if you will. So it's kind of interesting. You know, it's been summer. There's been a lot of weeding, a lot of stuff I have. And what's interesting is I hired a guy. I've been overwhelmed with like weeds at the farm. It was a great year for it. So I decided that I would hire a guy who did odd jobs. So I gave him a list. I gave, here's 10 things to do. And what's interesting is that he only did half the stuff I gave him. So what are you doing? Because I only do odd jobs. He did 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. It was odd to me anyway. Just kind of an interesting one. Wanted to kind of stop here for a minute. We're talking about corrections. I'd throw in a dad joke. You can use that one if you'd like. So there's a lot going on too with, if you will, and let me go to Ash. How about Ashley's antics? Give us some idea, some things that your Ashley's advocacy. Let's use that. Ashley's advocate. Why don't you help us out with some of the scams and things going on? Because this is a rife time again for people to come back in, and they're getting scammed in different ways, and it's becoming more complex. Maybe give us some ideas about what's going on.
Thank you, Chris. Yes. So our team enjoys bringing money-saving ideas to you, but more importantly, protecting your assets as well as yourself is even more so important to us. So I'd like to share my screen with everybody so that you can see a couple of scams that have come up recently that we just wanted to give a little extra attention to. You will also see something like this in your newest newsletter coming to a mailbox to you soon. If somebody is rushing you, let's say you take a call, if you are in text messages or potentially a chat, if they're rushing you to make a decision on something, think about it, stop for a second, potentially hang up and maybe even do some internet searching to see if it is a legit business or even a legit website. There's a lot of little adjustments that people can make in their URLs as well as their email addresses that can just look at quick glance very normal and what you think you're going to, but of course it may not, which could of course lead to fraud. So if you're not sure when you're about to go pay your bills or potentially check some of your accounts, don't trust a link that's potentially emailed to you. Again, that URL could have a slight adjustment in it, which can lead to a bad link that you click on. So again, type it in if you're not sure, go directly to that website. Providing personal identifying information to anyone can, of course, jeopardize your identity. If someone asks you for a one-time PIN or a one-time password, any of your online credentials, and of course your social security number, hang up immediately. Fraud often, again, happens with those typos, strange spellings. So again, just stop, think about it. And if you, of course, have a gut instinct that something is not right, report it. There's lots of USA websites. In your newsletter, there will be a link that you can report any scams or anything that you run into. And the more the government knows about it, the more they can dig into it and try to eliminate it. But again, just stop, think, hang up, or get out or close out of anything that seems a little bit suspicious. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. So one of the scams for me lately has been I've been getting appointments set on my, I think it's Outlook calendar, and it says they're wiring the funds into your account, or the bank will be looking at wiring some funds into your account, and this is the time that they're going to do it. So it's actually showing up as an appointment in my inbox, which is very interesting. So they're trying to find different sophisticated ways, because there's a lot of transactions and things we do, but I know it's always, I look at the source and I can find it very, very quickly as it's not correct. And I'm not doing any financial transactions that are outside. So, but looking at those kind of things, if you're in the middle of a mortgage, if you're in the middle of a process where you sold something, buying something big, you've got to watch out. There are some things out there you just want to take a very good look at them with caution. So I appreciate that. Well, before I go over to Ken's Corner, let's go to Michael Cycles. I just made that up right now.
Thanks, Chris. Today I want to talk about a few things for the baby boomer generation who's moving into the retirement phase, about thinking about retirement before you actually get there, which we talk a lot about. But a good place to start, obviously, would be starting to think about what's important to you, what your lifestyle is going to look like in retirement, and a few things to include in there. How will you spend your time? What will your purpose be? And how will you feel fulfilled during that time period? You go from working 40 plus hours a week to maybe transitioning into part-time or no work, and there's going to be a lot of time, a lot of opportunity to do some things that you weren't able to do before. As you move closer to that retirement date, it's really important to nail down your budget. Look at your income sources and where the spending is going to. Also look for what expenses may no longer be there in retirement, or what expenses may be added in retirement. Another good thing to check for is for old employer retirement plans, such as 401ks, pensions, or employee stock, or some of those companies you used to work for that you may have forgotten about. As you get closer, say, a year out, stole this idea from Chris, but it's really a good idea to practice your retirement budget. Can you make it on the budget that you were planning for? And of course, evaluate some of the different health insurance options that you will have in retirement. Throughout the process, we'll be planning alongside of you and helping you through this transition. And for many of you who work with us, you know that we'll be your guide and present some of these ideas to you. Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you as well, Mike. Appreciate you, Michael. So let's go to Ken's Corner. Ken, what's going on? What should we be paying attention?
Hey, I thought Michael Cycles, that was pretty good. I thought that was kind of catchy and, kind of relevant to the markets and the cycle.
That's a rhyme. It's my simple way of trying to make things sound like that, Ken's Corner, 2K,
Yeah.
Michael Cycles. It's just, Mike's Minute. It's pretty good stuff.
I thought that was pretty good. So I appreciate that. So I want to give a shout out and congratulate our newer retirees. If you've already retired, you know what the feelings can be around that piece. It's kind of mixed with emotions. You're elated, you're excited after 30, 40 years of working. All of a sudden a day comes where you don't have to anymore. And that leaves us happy, kind of sad, confused, excited. How do we prioritize our day at that point in time? So there's a lot of mixed emotions with retirees. I just want to give a shout out to and congratulate our newly retirees. Congratulations, well done. And how that parlays into all this is it usually comes down to, again, a framework of what we work off originally is, can we afford to retire? And so once we establish that, that's the framework that we get to. Then comes health insurance. Then comes, how do we navigate COBRA? How do we navigate the open market exchange? It's a really, really big piece. And it seems like we're having more and more of those conversations. And that really can sometimes be the deciding factor, whether Medicare is on the horizon, COBRA lasting 18 months, electing COBRA within 60 days, the open market exchange with subsidies, controlling income and showing income. These are all pieces that really come into the conversation when we're really starting to get serious about, hey, you know what? I think my time is up. I have 6 months left. I have 4 months left. I have 3 months left. These are the conversations. So I want to appreciate you allowing us to be part of your retirement journey and helping out with this piece. We certainly do appreciate it. I read a really great article recently about HSAs, and I almost forgot about the piece until I reread it. That's why we keep reading things. Is that with HSAs, if you incur an expense today, and you have a choice if you have an HSA, you can either pay out of pocket to pay off that medical expense, or you can tap into your HSA and use that to pay for the expense. What we find interesting, and this article kind of pointed this out, is that more and more of you, if you have HSAs and you have those available to you, we're starting to talk about investing a little bit, a portion of those for the future. So this article talked about if you incur an expense today, there is no time limit that you have for the reimbursement of that expense from an HSA. So think about that. If you incur an expense today, you put it in a shoebox, you put that away for yourself, you invest your HSA for 20 years plus. Now 20 years later, you pull out that expense from your shoebox, you can reimburse yourself from the HSA. I find that to be very intriguing. That could probably get a little cumbersome, and you got to kind of remember 20 years later that you have the expense. That's why you have it in the shoebox, of course, right? But I find that to be an interesting strategy to say, okay, what do we do? Do we pay today? Do we pay tomorrow? How do we go about doing that? And I wanted to bring that to your attention because I thought that was an interesting piece. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. Ken recently told me that he was at an event where they had a silent auction. And he said he came back with a dog whistle and 2 mimes. At any rate, it's kind of funny. I was really surprised about that one as well. But as we go through, I just wanted to give you some of those. Before I get to wrapping up Lisa's lighthouse, that's not good, but I just made it up right now. I know exactly. She's like our beacon to tell us, what we should be looking out as. I wanted to talk about something that I thought was very interesting. So I've had a little bit of time to think about this, but do you realize that most of the things you have of most value are invisible? You ever thought about that? Most of the things you most treasure are invisible. Yeah, Chris, what are you talking about? I paused there. I didn't actually swear. But what the heck are you talking about? But how about love, kindness, peace? I mean, a lot of these massive emotions, things you really want and crave, they're invisible, but they're also within your own grasp and your own creation. Anxiety is often a killer of this. Worry about the future, bringing future problems into today. A lot of people have become really, really, really good at taking something that might just chance of maybe will happen and bringing it into today to ruin today. Why would we ever do that? You know somebody who does it. You may do it yourself. I would say work heavily on living in today. Problems that will happen or may happen in the future, let them happen in the future. Really interesting to look at that. But I look at this as some of the most valuable things we have are invisible. Make sure you appreciate those as well. Think about those. Some of the things you have, trust. We want trust. We want to be, kind. These are really, really important. Anyway, those struck me as a very, very important. I don't want to go too much in it because I know we've gone a little bit longer today on some of the different items we've talked about, but I thought that was interesting as we went through. I have another one as well I'll talk about maybe after a bit here, but I think some of the things we've also seen going on is This year so far, mortgage rates are 94, or mortgage refinances are 94% higher than they were this time a year ago. So you're actually finding mortgages being refinanced. The Fed chairman wants to reduce interest rates before we hit the 2% inflation, if you will, as far as how it's measured. There's also something happening called fractional hiring that's been growing. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's hiring people for fractional jobs. So somebody might hold 2 fractional jobs rather than a single whole job for 40 hours a week. Interesting as you look at some of these trends that are going on, but we've seen these, you've also seen it's a great time for the diversification we've had to do rebalancing. We're finding asset classes like large growth and small growth, we have, or even emerging markets have completely different returns. Wonderful time to do the sell high, buy low we do of rebalancing. I know Zach will talk about that at some future program, but it's really a great time to, I call it fall fundamentals. Fall for me is the football games. It's a time for reflection. It's a time when the leaves start to turn. I call trees giants. When the giants start to, lose their leaves, they start to turn colors. It's really kind of cool this time of year. I find it very reflective. The nights get very cool. You walk outside, you feel that initial chill, which is, I think, going to happen this Sunday. I think it's supposed to be a low of 42 or something in that range here in Wisconsin, which is pretty chilly. But this is coming. I love this time of year to take reflection. Questions for us as we meet you through this fall time frame. They're going to be questions about, what's happening in investments, what happened. We'll get all that. That's fantastic. Also be willing to share some of your story, who you are, what's going on, what your concerns are. That's how we can help you the most. That's the programs we put together with Michelle Norris. We've got a great conversation today with somebody as well. Will help us with our thinking and optimizing our brain and mental function as we age as well. There's some really cool things we want to do as well. And again, they're there for you to participate in if you'd like. Before I continue, before I close, I want to make sure I bring Lisa on for Lisa's Lighthouse. Lisa, tell us what we should be out looking for. What should we be aware of?
Thank you, Chris. Before I go into our Gentian happenings, I just wanted to remind you about the e-delivery in client access for you guys to check the form ADV disclosure documents in e-delivery. These documents will be sent out by Raymond James, not by us, annually in January. And if you want them sent via e-delivery, then in client access, you can definitely check that box. There will be a pop-up, but if you've already bypassed that pop-up, since we kind of all do, just close all the pop-ups when they come on. There is a little bullet point that you can check once you're in your client access for that ADV disclosure document. It will be a very large document if you get it by paper, so that'll be a good idea to do. So coming forward with Gentian and our events for September, which is crazy that we're already in September, but as Chris said, we all love fall, especially in Wisconsin. So Sunday, September the 8th, it is Grandparents' Day. I know a lot of our clients are grandparents, so happy Grandparents' Day to all of you. And then on Monday, and thank you to everyone who's RSVP'd, we've kind of closed that one out now for the Gentian Shred event on Monday and Eat Outside Day. Should be a fun day. That's from 11 till 2 here at the office and at the Doty Farm, where we'll be able to do all electronics and shred the papers that you'll all be bringing in. So that should be fun. Wednesday, September the 11th, is Patriot Day, and we have limited office hours due to our team focusing on our Getting Better For You Day. It's a day that we do every once in a while so we can get all our knowledge and get better for the rest of the year and for you guys. Wednesday, September the 18th is our next bi-weekly update. Same time, same Zoom link, 9 a.m. And Wednesday, September the 18th is the September Birthday Club. I know we've had a lot of RSVPs for the September one. Hopefully the weather still stays great. And we will see you then. So September the 18th at noon for our September Birthday Club. Lauren will be celebrating her birthday on the 20th. So she'll be celebrating at the birthday lunch. And then the 21st, it's actually on Saturday, but it's World Gratitude Day. I know we have them at Gentian virtually every day, but on the 21st, it's World Gratitude Day. And then the Sunday, the day after, it is the official autumn begins. So that is the end of summer. And autumn is then in the works on the 22nd. The 25th of September is our Ladies of Gentian webinar gathering, and we will be doing something for the holiday, Halloween. I can't believe I'm talking about Halloween already, but that's what we'll be making on that, ladies and gentlemen. So you can still RSVP for that. Will be in the happenings that gets emailed out to you. So a lot coming up, and I'm sure we'll have a lot coming up in October, but that's all for now in September. So hope to see you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Lisa. Appreciate you're telling us what we should pay attention to. You know, it's kind of interesting too. I got to caution you guys, never take sides at an argument at a dinner table, right? When you're at a dinner, never take sides, never take sides. It's actually a trick statement because it's actually a perfect time to take sides. Bring Tupperware because nobody's paying attention. They're all arguing and you get to take sides. It's fantastic. So I just wanted to bring one more up. It was kind of fun. It was a horrible one, but it's fun. Hey, we had one question on the webinar as well before we close. And the question is, regarding IRA conversion to Roth IRA, is it better when the market is high, or is it better when the market, or does it matter? It's better when the market's low or high? Typically, we have a lot of assets to diversify with. So when we look at it, we've almost always got something that's not at its peak. So we can convert it almost any time. The ideal scenario for some people is to convert the lowest asset when it drops temporarily a whole bunch into something that's a Roth. That way you don't pay taxes at a higher basis. But quite honestly, we've looked at it over time, and it is individual basis because you've also got taxes involved as well. There's so many multivariables in the equation. It's difficult to answer. Is it better in one scenario? Is it better in another? The answer is maybe. Sorry, Byron. I know I have to say that as you did ask the question, but I think Peter will answer that one offline, or we'll have somebody answer that one as well. It's going to be more pertinent to your situation. If you're wondering, let us know as well. I think it's an important one too. Thank you so much for being here today for a couple of extra minutes on our bi-weekly webinar. There's an awful lot to go over. There's an awful lot of volatility going on. You've been through it before. So far in the market anyway, 100% of corrections have been, that's right, temporary. So I want to thank you tremendously for your patience, for your learning, for your understanding in that as well. And temporary corrections, however deep they may be or short they may be, oftentimes historically post-election, you'll find markets are pretty decent for the next 12 months, sometimes on average, almost a double-digit return for the next year. Some great things to look for. That's no guarantee whatsoever. That's just a possibility and a probability as well. With that, I want to thank you tremendously for your time today, but also for being here, for your introductions to key people. We've had a wonderful growth over the summer because of introductions by you. You've kept our practice growing and thriving as we continue to bring our skills up to make sure we're meeting your, making your retirement hopefully as good as it possibly could be. But we are here for you on that. We want to thank you, though, for your introductions tremendously, too. That's been a wonderful, wonderful summer for that. With that, thank you from our galactic headquarters right here in Mequon, Wisconsin. We want to thank you as our gentian flowers are out here in bloom. You might see that as you come around here over the next few weeks. Take a look around the property. We want to give you a wonderful, wonderful send-off here into the next couple of weeks until we see you coming up again 2 weeks from today. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.